Welcome, Realtors. This is Nobu Hada, Director of Industry Outreach here at the National Association of Realtors. And thank you for joining us to talk about what I think is one of the most awesome things that has happened in a long time here at NAR, FHA Condo rule changes. Here along with me today are two of the best policy experts we have on the topic. Megan, say hi. You guys want to say hi to the Facebook lands?
Hello, everybody. I'm
Hi,
Megan
everyone.
Booth. I'm the Director of Federal Housing and Commercial Policy here at NAR.
Hi everyone, I'm Sahar Siddiqui. I'm a Senior Policy Representative on Federal Housing and Valuation Policy.
So we're recording this now, meant to be live. Sorry about the technical difficulties. So as this is playing, feel free to leave any comments or questions that you might have on these changes in the commentary below, and we'll make sure that one of the three of us here in DC will be answering these questions as best we can. But Megan, let's start out with this history of this. I think we've been talking about this since I was an agent.
Yes.
About 7-8 years ago.
Absolutely.
Tell us about the history. What's happened since? Go.
So we've been working on this for about 11 years now. Back previous to 2008, FHA actually considered condos part of their multifamily portfolio. They didn't even treat them like single-family loans. And so they had a lot of restrictions on them. And so we started working with HUD and said, well, what can we do to make it easier for people to be able to buy a condominium with an FHA mortgage? And so they said, well, if it was in our single-family portfolio. And we said, all right, well, let's do that. So we got legislation passed in 2008 to put it into the single-family portfolio. As you know, 2008, kind of right after the Great Recession was starting. So unfortunately, what HUD ended up doing was started freaking out, and they sort of shut down on condos at that time. So they actually made the rules a little bit more restrictive right at the beginning of when we made that change. So we started meeting with HUD, we started meeting with Congress, talking about this issue that first-time home buyers, older people wanting to downsize, people who want to live in cities, condos is often the most affordable, reasonable alternative for them. So it took a number of years. We used NA's governance process. The Federal Financing and Housing Policy Committee did a lot of work on this. We had meetings with HUD, we had work groups, we continued to fight this issue with some of our partners, the home builders, the Community Associations Institute, to try and get HUD to change their policies. And they just weren't doing it fast enough. So we went to Congress and we wrote up a little, the committee supported this guidebook that we published. It showed the impact that condo loans not being used through FHA was having on the market, and the fact that first-time homebuyers didn't have access to this great option for homeownership. So we got legislation introduced in 2015, and that bill finally became law in 2017, and now we've been waiting and waiting and waiting for the law to be enacted, and finally, in July, they came out with the rules, which will become effective on October 15th.
Yeah, I coming from the agent point of view, condos, townhouses, anything with an HOA, is this affordable, even now?
Right,
So
absolutely.
This is a big deal. This is a win, right, Sahar? I mean,
Oh, definitely. This is actually a really great win. In fact, there's actually a lot of wonderful things in this new final rule from HUD that are going to make it a lot more flexible and less onerous for worthy borrowers who want to use FHA financing to get, as Megan said, one of the best entryways into home ownership. So, I mean, I have a whole list because there's so many great things. So one of the really big wins is the return of what HUD is calling single unit approval. Now, in the past, this has been referred to as spot loans. What this is that in a building that has not been approved by FHA, you couldn't get an FHA loan in it. So there are lots of condo projects out there that just weren't available. They've released in this new rule guidelines for how, if you find a condo you want in a building that hasn't been FHA approved, you might still be able to get that condo. So you just do have to have a few things. So first of all, any building has to have at least 5 units. There's going to be a limit on how many FHA loans can be in that building in the first place. For single unit approval, it's going to be a 10% max on buildings with 10 or more units. You're going to need at least 50% owner occupancy already in this building. There's going to be a maximum of 35% commercial space, and those are sort of the main ones that have to be concerned at. But the reality is this is going to open up a lot more opportunities for borrowers, and it's going to be great. In addition, for FHA-approved buildings, one of the problems, or what we've heard, was that the certification period was 2 years, and then projects would have to recertify and submit a full application. This could be quite onerous for especially such a small amount of time. So FHA has actually increased the certification period by 1 year. So now it's going to be 3 years instead of 2 years. And they're allowing an additional 6 months on top of that to get in the recertification, which thankfully is now less onerous. They don't have to completely reapply. They'll just have to update some of the items already.
Great.
The other one that we think is a really great win has to do with owner occupancy percentages for FHA approved buildings. So right now, it has to be 50% owner occupancy. However, HUD is allowing for buildings that show strong financials. So for example, reserves at least 10%, and these buildings have to be over 12 months old. They can actually apply to have that owner occupancy percentage be 35%. So again, just opens it up, makes it a lot better. In the past, it was possible to get a lower percentage, but you had to show 20% financial reserves, which is quite an onerous burden for a lot of buildings. So a lot of really great things.
Yeah, I not only is it a more streamlined process from what I'm seeing and hearing from you guys, Spotlight forever will be known as Spot approvals for me and you guys, right? But it's for a longer period of time, and recertification's easier, right? As long as and overall, what you're seeing is a much more stable HOA if they go through this process, which is good no matter what is happening finance-wise. Numbers-wise, though, what are we talking about here? Potentially inventory, sales. What is the impact of this?
Oh yeah, absolutely. So estimates are actually that this could potentially open up all the rules all together. So rules for single unit approval plus the less onerous restrictions on FHA projects generally. We could see an increase of 20,000 to 60,000 more available units for borrowers per year, which is amazing. As of right now, only 6.5% of all condo buildings in this country are FHA approved. So we're definitely going to see that number improve
But
as
it's
well.
not because they just don't know, right? It's just that they've almost fallen through the cracks because of the issues that have happened economically. But it takes a realtor now, right?
Yeah.
To come in and say, hey, this is how we can get it done. We had some questions come in for these folks, so I'm going to get to some of these. So here's so transactionally speaking, right? Here's a couple that have come up. So the building is not approved. How does my client get spot loan approval when it's finally up and ready to go? What's that process look like? How do I get it done?
So you have to go through your lender. So the way the spot loan is going to work is a lender can decide that the unit is viable and will approve it for FHA. So it has to be an FHA approved lender already out there that they're getting their financing through, and that lender will sort of decide. So here laid out some of the parameters you have to meet, but it's up to the lender to decide. Now the only negative for spot loan is if you're a realtor out there and you're working with a client, there could have already been a spot loan in this approved in this
Already
building,
in the pipeline, right.
but there's no way for you to know that.
Yep.
The good thing about when the building is fully approved, there's actually a list on HUD's website of you can look up and see which buildings are approved. For spot loan, they're not going to be added there because the building still isn't approved, just
Right.
that spot loan was approved. So that's the only negative to spot loans is you may be doing something that's already been gone through the process. But it's still worth doing so your client can get into that unit they want without the building having to go through the certification.
All right, agents, make sure your loan mortgage partners are up to snuff on this stuff and they're paying attention to all this stuff. Another question. I worked with the condo board and they resisted getting FHA approval because of the time and money involved in getting the certification. What can I tell them that it's changed?
So exactly what we said before. I think the biggest thing is that the whole certification process is a lot less onerous, or the recertification process is a lot less onerous. You don't have to resubmit a whole application. So the first time you apply, yes, you'll still have to submit everything you need for approval. But in 3 years, not 2, but 3 years, when you have to recertify, you're just doing a simple update. It's going to be a lot easier and a lot better. Plus, with the changing of the rules on commercial space, owner occupancy levels. I don't know if we mentioned this, yes, but the FHA investor rules and things like that. Yeah. It's just generally going to be a lot more flexible and understanding that different types of buildings with these different rules can still be financially sound and good investment for FHA.
Totally. Realtors, now is a really good time to start making these relationships with HOAs across your market. My wife is in Chicago. She's done this before. She's ecstatic that it's going to be easier for her to get this stuff done. It's worth the work because she's had multiple clients from these condo buildings who have seen her do the work with the association to create this inventory for her. And
And
some inventory is really hard to come by.
Absolutely. So we encourage realtors to go and meet with your local HOAs, meet with your condo boards, and say, hey, these rules have changed. It's a lot more easier. Explain the changes. Explain that the certification is now good for 3 years. It's really 3 years plus 6 months. And after that, you're just updating. The old way, it was like you were a brand new building getting approved every time.
Right.
Now they're just letting them update. So it's going to be a lot easier for these associations to get approved. And so as a realtor, I think you should get out there and talk to your local associations. Go into those condo buildings, say, hey, I can help you.
Yeah.
We can get this building approved, and it'll be much easier. It'll improve the market for the condos in that unit. It's good for everybody. It increases the owner occupancy. People who are buying with an FHA loan have to be buying it as an owner occupant. It's good for everybody.
Yeah, that's part of who we are, right?
That's right.
See what I did there, guys? I had a client who couldn't get a condo in the building they wanted due to the lack of FHA certification. Is there a period of time a new client would have to wait to get approved for an FHA condo in that same building because it was just recently denied with the new rule in mind?
So this is going to be a bit of an interesting one. So in theory, these rules, which go into effect October 15th, this building, depending on why, the buyer couldn't get it, it might be something where, actually under these new rules, this building, especially with single unit approval, this is an option now for FHA borrowers. That being said, it's hard to know without seeing the building in particular. There might be a completely different reason that the new rules don't go to, in which case, the building in question might still have some issues. But I would say that if you are a realtor out there and this is a building that you think would be of interest to a lot of your clients, go back to them. Bring up the new rules, talk to them, see what's going on. Maybe it's an option. Maybe it's something they can work on. And while they may not make the October 15th deadline, which is coming up, maybe in a few months they can actually get to be certified or at least available for
if you go on the HUD website, you can actually see all the buildings that are approved. There's if you just type in FHA condo approval, you'll go to the HUD website and it'll show you this list. If you put in the name of the condo building, if it's been denied recently, it should actually tell you. There's a notes field, and you can look in there and find out why they were denied. So if they were denied for a reason, like Sahir said, that the new rules changed, then they should be fine. Or maybe they're denied for another reason, but you can work with that condo association to get over whatever that was that denied them. So you have that ability to go in and check out and try and find out why they didn't get the approval.
Do you have that HUD website? I know it's a super long URL.
It is. It's a really long URL.
Or is it simply Google?
I would Google HUD FHA condo approval, and it's the first one that'll come up.
And spoiler alert, guys, if you need to figure out what's approved and what's not approved when this new rule kicks in, go to your MLS, log in, and look it up via the legal name.
Right. Yes.
Rather than what is on the sign on the front of the condo condo development, because they can differ. Usually it's that business name that needs to get that done.
Absolutely.
But that's what we're talking about, right? The rules they're going to continue to evolve. You're going to keep up with these things, I trust.
So there's two things we're doing. One is HUD has actually provided themselves with a lot of flexibility. When they put out these rules, they put out the rules that are in place now, but they also provide a framework where they have more flexibility to change these rules without going back to Congress. So for example, on the owner occupancy, they put a scale in there that FHA can put out there as the approval rate. Same thing for the commercial space, which I don't think we talked about yet. One of the things that the rule did was it increased the amount of commercial space that can be allowed in a building.
Oh, great.
Which
That's
is
new.
Great.
Yeah.
Yeah, you see a lot
Chicago,
of these sort of town center developments. They put retail on the bottom, then office, and then residential above that. FHA used to have only 25% of the building could be commercial. They've increased it to 35%. And the other thing they changed, which is really important, especially in places like Chicago, here in DC, parking. Parking used to all be considered commercial, and it would count against you. In the new rule, they say if the parking that's reserved for residents, that not used for the retail space, doesn't count against your commercial space. So that helps a lot. If you have a building that has parking for the residents below, that's not considered commercial space anymore. Big change.
All these rules, I totally forgot. 3,000 reasons why I don't sell real estate anymore, why you guys do it really awesome. Okay, so I'm looking for listing opportunities, right? My wife will probably go in and start in some of the hotter condo buildings that aren't FHA approved. She's going to probably start farming these things. Where do I go for information about this stuff? Is it going to go to NAR.realtor, HUD, combination of the two?
If you go to NAR.realtor/condominiums,
Yep.
You can find all the information about the new rules, a little summary we've done of the new rules. You can get a link to the actual HUD rule on it. You can also get a link to the condo handbook for FHA. I will encourage you not to try and read the entire handbook. It's like 700 pages. There's about 75 that are about condos, and we will our website we link you to where those pages are in that handbook. So that gives you sort of all the guidelines for what you need to do.
Yeah, and we definitely intend to keep updating as well. So we'll be releasing new information probably throughout the fall about how things are working, what to learn, more one-pagers, handouts that'll be useful for realtors who want to go talk to these condo stations and HOAs.
So if I'm farming for buyers, right, they're going to use an FHA loan to buy a condo. Can we start looking now? Does the purchase agreement need to be dated after these rules kick in? How does that work?
So that's a really good question. So I don't think the purchase agreement has, but the bank will not approve it until after October 15th if if it falls under the new rules.
Okay.
So when you go back to your lender so you could absolutely start looking now. October 15th is only a few weeks away. So if you start looking now and then they find a unit, after the bank will be able to tell you, because the bank will know FHA approved lenders got this information in July. They know what the new rules are. They'll be able to tell you, okay, this one will be fine after October 15th. So.
Okay. Partner up with your with the mortgage people now, make sure they're on top of it all. Another really good question. I mean, Megan, what can realtors do to make sure that their clients have the best opportunities to purchase condos? Is it the grunt work now?
We're kind of in that phase, right? I think the first thing you should do is make yourself aware of which buildings are already in your area that are already approved. So you go into that HUD lookup tool, you can search by zip code, you can search by name of your town, you can search by the businessly legal name of the condo, and you can find which ones are already approved. So go in there and see which one's approved. Like I said earlier, you can also see which ones applied but weren't approved. So go in and check those out. If you go in there and you look at one and it says, well, I didn't get approved because I had 30% commercial space instead of 25, well, now the limit is 35.
Yeah.
Those people could reapply like that and they would be approved. So you can, as a realtor, you can go out there and do that research. It's not that hard. It's a very easy lookup tool, and there's literally a field that says notes. You look in there, you see why they weren't approved, you'll know. And then if there's buildings that aren't on there, there's a lot of buildings that aren't on that list because they haven't even tried. They just heard, oh, it's awful. It's only good for 2 years. You have to do it every 2 years. You have to hire a lawyer. You have to do all that.
Right.
But now where they're easing the recertification part of it, there's more reason for boards to consider doing it. So get out there and talk to them.
Yeah, it's a really good exercise in general to get your reserves up.
Absolutely.
That's the number one question I always get. My wife gets it all the time. What's a good reserve number to have?
Right.
Now you've got it for that FHA
right.
underwriting.
Exactly.
One question that I had, frankly, is does that change anything with the underwriting standards? Because FHA, right, appraisals, they stick, right?
Right.
So that none of that stuff changes, right?
No. So the rule is very clear. It goes to the sections that, as mentioned, are outlined in the rule, the handbook, and of course on Nardar Realtor under our guidance document. So again, specifically owner occupancy, commercial space, a single unit approval. Some of the appraisal requirements, some of the rules on, restrictions on what the HOA can ask or do with potential borrowers, those have not been changed. Those remain the same.
Okay. So let me get this straight, right? Do the work now. Start talking to HOAs now. Maybe in one that you live in, right? If you're in one of these cities, right? Start preparing buyers potentially now that there's going to be up to 60,000 new units available for them.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
That might be available. Check out what's in your own market, really, at this point. If you're in a market with a lot of HOAs, it's fantastic.
Absolutely.
Right? But then stay tuned, right? Rules can continue to change, and this is a typical GAD question. Rules sound great, but did we get everything we wanted? What can we look forward to in changes, right?
Yeah, so I would only say great positive changes. Did we get everything we wanted? NAR,
We always want more.
we have our own policy and thoughts on how FHA should be assessing condos. So, for example, when it comes to commercial space and owner occupancy and FHA concentration, for FHA concentration, which is just the number of FHA loans in a building, we don't think HUD should have a limit on that. If you have an FHA borrower, you have an owner occupant. That only makes the building more financially secure. So why would you limit that?
Really good point.
For example, in a neighborhood of traditional single family homes, you wouldn't limit the number of FHA borrowers. So, that's something that NAR has as a policy position. And when it comes to commercial space and owner occupancy, our position is that we think it should be looked at more holistically. Like these sort of straight, limits may not always make sense. So that's kind of where we stand from a policy perspective. So of course, we will continue to advocate for that going forward.
Yeah, default rates still are pretty low, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
these people, they're saving longer, right? These are normal human beings trying to find homes, in this case condos. They're saving longer. They're going to live in the unit. Owner occupancy,
Right.
that's a really good point to bring up when you're talking to HOAs about all of this
Right.
stuff, right?
Get more owner
Right?
occupants in.
And it's a safe bet. Just because they're putting less down doesn't mean that they're not
Exactly.
any less of a buyer.
Ironically, throughout this whole process, one of the things that we've been most frustrated with is if you look at the performance of FHA loans, condos have been performing stronger than single-family detached homes. So they were putting all these restrictions on it, and we're like, but they're already performing better. Why aren't you why don't you want more people to go in? One of the arguments we made with Congress was, so you're telling me this newly married couple that wants to get into home ownership for the first time, you would rather them pay $60,000, $75,000 more for a single-family home in the same neighborhood they want to live in when they could have got a condo because you're prohibiting them from buying that condo. How is that in anyone's benefit, right? So if you can expand the opportunities for condos, you're going to get more stable homeowners in there that can improve the neighborhoods for everybody.
Yeah, it's a crazy time. I mean, it's just that you go into a lot of condo buildings, short-term rentals and everything. That's a whole other issue.
That's a whole other issue.
You guys are talking right now, but I mean, this is taking what has traditionally been a strong product, making it even stronger.
Absolutely.
Any last bits of news, things you want to share with our audience here?
Well, one thing that we would like is to hear from realtors as you are talking to condo projects, as you're taking your buyers and sellers through these new rules. How's it working out? Is it helping? Is there anything that is coming up that you think NAR should be looking at, should be advocating more for, or just you want to tell HUD, hey, this was a great change. Like, please keep reaching out to us. Keep letting us know how things are going.
Maybe we'll put an email address or something like that on that form that we make for on a realtor for this.
Yeah,
That's
absolutely.
great. Feedback is awesome, right? Especially in this day and age when things are evolving. Megan, about you?
Absolutely. So the only other thing I would say is we are going to, as Sahir talked about, we didn't get everything we wanted. There's a lot of great things in here. We are going to be submitting formal comments to HUD, asking for some more stuff. As Sahir said, owner occupancy. We don't think there should be any owner occupancy limit for FHA. Freddie and Fannie condo loans don't require the building to know what the owner occupancy is, because if you're going in as an owner occupant, they don't have to know. FHA, everybody's an owner occupant. We don't think there should be a requirement. Same thing with commercial. We think there should be some more flexibility. The rule does, other than the 35%, it does allow exceptions up to 49%. So that's excellent. We'll be interested to see, do they actually do that? They had a waiver process earlier for commercial space, and not a single waiver was approved for more commercial space.
The great exception.
Yes, right. The great exception that never happens. So we're going to be pushing them to provide exceptions where it makes sense in a building that's financially stable. Just because having retail space in it doesn't make in fact, someone would argue that it would make the residential units more valuable.
Yeah.
So we think they should continue to look at that.
Awesome. Sahir, Megan, thank you guys so much for sharing your expertise. I think I could speak for all of us by saying that we are so bummed that we were able to broadcast this live due to some technical difficulties. But again, we're going to post this everywhere. If you have any questions from any of us here or any of our DC policy people on this topic or anything else, please leave it in the comment section of this
typing
video,
away.
Absolutely.
and they will answer it. Trust me, because they love sitting on Facebook.
We can.
All right, thank you guys so much for joining us, and stay tuned for more of these live broadcasts. I enjoy doing this. You guys do?
Absolutely.
Yeah, this is fun. Thank you so much for your time, and we'll see you out there, Facebookers.